Welcome back to Abyss of Horror. Before we begin tonight, I need you to do something for me. Wherever you are right now, whether you're lying in bed, sitting in your car, walking somewhere alone with your earphones in, I want you to stop for just a second. Look around you. Take in the room, the corners, the spaces you don't usually look at, the closet door, the gap under the bed, the wall behind you. Now, tell me honestly, how certain are you that you are alone right now? Not pretty sure. Not probably. Certain. Because the person in tonight's story was certain too. Every single night. For nearly a month. And she was wrong every single time. This is the Hollow Hours. Her name was Emmy. 26 years old, junior editor at a small literary press in Tokyo, freshly out of a 2-year relationship that had ended the way the worst ones do. Not in fire, but in the slow, quiet accumulation of being made to feel like you were too much and not enough at exactly the same time. She needed a fresh start. She needed a space that was entirely, uncomplicatedly hers. And when she walked into that 4th-floor apartment in Konji, a slightly worn, beautifully strange neighborhood in the west of the city, full of jazz bars and vintage record shops, and the feeling that time moves a little differently there, she knew. This was it. This was the one. She called her mother that Sunday evening and said, "I love it. It feels like mine. I'm finally home." And she meant it, every word. She just had no idea what was already home with her. The apartment was simple. A main room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a small storage closet right beside the front door. The previous tenant had left a few things behind: a ceramic dish by the sink, a coat hook on the wall, a cord of dried flowers above the window, so old the petals had crumbled into dust you could barely see. When Emmy asked about them, the building manager, a quiet man in his 60s named Watanabe-san, always in the same brown cardigan, always with this expression on his face like he was carefully choosing which truth to tell, said the previous tenant had moved abroad. Quick. Matter of fact, he said it while looking just slightly to the left of Emmy's face. She noticed. She forgot. We always forget. The footsteps started on the 5th night, or more accurately, that was the night she could no longer pretend she hadn't been hearing them. They came from above her, slow, deliberate, crossing from directly over her bedroom to somewhere above the kitchen, then back again. Then silence for about 10 minutes, then the crossing again. Same path, same pace, same rhythm, night after night. Now here's the thing, and this is important, because this is the thing that makes this story about all of us, and not just about Emmy. She didn't panic. She didn't spiral. She did what every reasonable person does. She found an explanation. Upstairs neighbor. Insomnia. Old building. It's nothing. And that is how it works, isn't it? That is the trick our minds play on us. We are wired to find the human explanation. We are wired to assume company rather than confront the alternative, because the alternative is a place we don't want to go. So she went to Watanabe-san the next morning, and she told him about the footsteps. And he listened with that patient, practiced face of his, and when she finished, he said very gently, "There is no 5th floor." She laughed, said she must have miscounted. He said no, 4 floors, always. She was on top. She was the ceiling. She went back upstairs. She told herself she was tired. She filed it away. She moved on. The footsteps did not move on. In the 2nd week, the mugs moved. Small thing, ridiculous thing almost. But here's why it matters. Emmy was particular about her mugs. The tall blue one always lived on the left. Always. It was one of those tiny private rituals that single people develop. The small architecture of a life lived alone. You keep things exactly where you put them because there is no one else to move them. And one morning she came into the kitchen and the blue mug was on the right. The white one with the chipped handle was in the middle. Everything shifted by exactly one position. She stood there staring at those mugs, the way you stare at a word you've read so many times it stops looking like a real word. She moved them back. She said nothing, because to say something is to make it a thing, and she had made a promise to herself after the relationship ended. She had been told more than once, gently, that she had a tendency to make things out of nothing. And maybe she had. Maybe this was that. Maybe she'd moved the mugs herself at 6 in the morning and just didn't remember. The next morning, the blue mug was on the right again. So she did something smart. She started taking photographs. Every night before bed. One photo of the kitchen. Everything in its place. Every morning she checked. 6 days of nothing. 6 days of feeling quietly foolish. And then, on the 7th morning, she walked out of her bedroom and found the ceramic dish, the one the previous tenant had left by the sink, the one she had never touched out of some vague, instinctive respect, sitting in the center of the kitchen table. The photo from the night before showed it by the sink. The photo from that morning showed the table, empty. The dish was on the table. Someone had been in her kitchen while she slept. They had moved the dish because they wanted to eat at the table. Think about that. She called her friend Sakura. Practical, sharp, not easily spooked. Told her everything. The footsteps, the mugs, the dish. Sakura listened, and then she said what a good friend says. Have you been sleeping? Have you been eating properly? Because the first thing we do when someone we love describes something frightening is look for the version of the story where they are the variable. Not because we don't believe them, because we cannot afford to believe them. Sakura said she'd come over that weekend. The footsteps came back that night. In the 3rd week, Emmy found the marks. She was looking for her umbrella in the storage closet, the one beside the front door. And she crouched down to reach past her vacuum cleaner, and she pulled the cord for the light. And that's when she saw them. On the inside wall of the closet, groups of vertical lines, 5 marks, then a diagonal cross, then a new group. The way prisoners count days, dozens and dozens of groups, covering the wall from about knee height to nearly the ceiling. Someone had been standing inside her closet for a very long time, counting. She called Watanabe-san. He came. He looked at the marks with no surprise at all, and that, honestly, is the detail that should haunt you, because surprise would have been the normal reaction. And he said he would have the wall repainted. Emmy asked who made them. He said the previous tenant had experienced some difficulties. She pushed. She asked for contact information. He looked at his hands. She stopped being reachable a little while ago, he said. Sakura came that Saturday. Brought wine, brought a plant, walked every room with the posture of someone who has already decided there is nothing to find. Checked the closet, looked at the photographs, sat on the kitchen floor and stared at the ceiling and said, "Pipes. It's an old building. It's pipes." They drank the wine. They talked about everything else. At some point, Emmy fell asleep on the sofa with the lights on. She woke up at 3:14 in the morning. The apartment was silent. Not peaceful silent, that pressurized silence, the held breath kind she'd learned to dread. She sat up, lights still on, Sakura visible through the bedroom door, asleep, everything in its place. Except the storage closet door was open. Not wide open, not dramatically. Just 4 inches. The way a door opens when someone pushes it from the inside and then decides to wait. She had checked it before falling asleep. She was certain. Emmy sat on that sofa and stared at the 4-inch gap for a very long time. Nothing moved, no sound. And then she stood up because that is the kind of person she was. And she crossed the room and she put her hand flat on the door. And she paused. In that pause, she felt something she would never fully be able to describe. Not fear, exactly. She described it later as recognition. the feeling not of encountering something new, but of finally seeing clearly something that had been there all along. She pushed the door open, her coats on their hooks, the vacuum, the box of books, the freshly painted wall, clean, pale, unmarked, a perfectly ordinary closet. She almost laughed. She reached for the light cord, and then she felt the draft. Not cold, not warm. The movement of air that happens when something that has been very still begins, slowly, to move, coming from behind her coats, from the back wall. And in that draft came the smell she had been smelling for a month without being able to name it. Old paper, cedar, and the deep stale stillness of air that has been enclosed for a very long time. The smell of a space that had been lived in, separately, secretly. Right next to her, the back wall of the closet was not a wall. Set flush into the panel, painted over to match everything else, was a door. Narrow, barely shoulder width, with a small brass latch that was polished smooth from use. Touched many, many times, Sakura was the one who actually opened it. Emmy had woken her, shaking, unable to say much beyond "there's something in the closet." And Sakura, who it turns out is braver than she seems when the situation is real rather than theoretical, took the flashlight from her phone and pushed it open. Beyond the door was a room, about 1.5 meters wide, running the full depth of the apartment behind the closet wall. A camping mat on the floor, a thermal blanket, 3 plastic water bottles, 2 empty, a small battery-powered lamp, a canvas bag, crackers, a change of clothes, a phone charger with no phone attached, and on the floor beside the mat, a notebook. Sakura opened it. She read the first page. She closed it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She was living here. While you were living here, she was here the whole time." The notebook was a record, methodical, calm, disturbingly calm. The previous tenant, a 31-year-old former teacher whose name the notebook never gave, had never actually left. She had retreated into the walls of her own apartment rather than leave it. The hidden room had been there, unknown to anyone but her, and when the new lease was signed, she had simply stayed. In the dark, 3 feet from a stranger, every night. The footsteps were her moving through the apartment after Emmy fell asleep. The mugs rearranged because she couldn't break the habit of her own kitchen, even when it was no longer hers. The ceramic dish on the table because she wanted to eat at the table. She had been eating at that table in the dark, while Emmy slept 10 feet away. Watanabe-san knew. The notebook confirmed he had been leaving food in the lobby for her twice a week. A quiet arrangement, a kindness that had enabled something monstrous without quite meaning to. The notebook never explained why she couldn't leave. Whatever had broken in her, whatever had made the walls of a hidden room feel safer than the world outside, she kept that to herself. There was only the living, small, methodical, conducted in total silence, right beside someone who had no idea. They found her 4 days later at her sister's apartment. She had fled the night Emmy found the room. She must have heard Emmy wake, heard her cross the floor, understood that it was over. The last entry in the notebook read, "She opened the closet. I could feel her hand on the other side of the wall. She was so close. I think she knew. I think she has known for a while and just been too afraid to look." Emmy broke the lease the following week, moved to Setagaya, a newer building, thinner walls, neighbors whose arguments came through the plaster in full detail. She found the noise of it, the ordinary, messy human noise of other lives being lived just next to hers, the greatest comfort of her entire year. She kept 1 page from the notebook. Not the last entry, not the most disturbing one. An early entry from before Emmy had even moved in, when the woman still believed the apartment was hers. "This place is mine. I know every board. I know where the light falls in the afternoon. I know the sound it makes when the wind comes from the west. I am not ready to leave it. I don't think I know how to be somewhere else. I have tried before. I have never worked out how to make somewhere else feel real. Emmy read that page many times. She was never quite sure why. Maybe because she recognized it. Maybe because she had felt almost exactly that. Not about that apartment, but about other places, other people, other versions of herself she'd been forced to leave behind. Maybe because the woman in the walls was not a monster. She was just someone who did not know how to let go. And those, if you think about it, those are the most dangerous kind. Not because of what they do to us, but because of how much, if we're honest, we understand them. That night, in her new apartment in Setagaya, Emmy went to every closet, every cupboard, every wall that could, if she thought about it a certain way, be hiding something behind it. She knocked. She listened. Nothing answered. She got into bed, turned off the light, stared at the ceiling. And just before sleep came, she thought about the hollow hours. 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. The hours the woman had used to move through the apartment in the dark. Just living, just breathing, just being in the only space that felt like home, beside someone who had no idea. Emmy reached over and turned the light back on. She slept with it on for a long time after that. And somewhere out there, in some city, in some building, behind some wall that looks exactly like every other wall, something is counting another day. That's all for tonight's story. If you're watching this in the dark, maybe check the corners of the room one more time before you sleep. And if you're new here, welcome to Abyss of Horror. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. If you can sleep.